Hello, how are you, my dear?
I am good. One second. I'm just going to, there we go,
Hey,
invite you.
everyone on Facebook and Instagram. Super, super excited to be here. And Hannah is
Okay.
interviewing me this time. This is the most coolest thing ever. Let's
Well,
do
you know
this.
how our interviews go. It just turns into a gupshup. So
Totally.
I'm all about that.
Love
Yes.
it.
So Raj, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I mean, I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is what what did you feel when you saw the inauguration? Because I know you watched, like you and I were texting back and forth, you were watching it. So I
The whole
want,
thing.
when she stepped up to that podium and she raised her hand and you saw that smile on her face, what was your reaction? What was your first thoughts?
Well, similar to you, Hannah, the moment for me was so overwhelming because there's so many layers of what was happening at that very moment when she stood up there, as a woman of color, as a woman that should be seen for her, for her credentials and what she's accomplished over and above her gender and her ethnicity. The fact that, finally, we have hope that there is a seat at the table for women and for women of color and for, just the whole idea behind the first step of ever being represented is to, being seen. Like you need to be seen before you can be heard, right? And here we have an opportunity where we are being seen and we're being heard at a time when I have to be so honest with you, Hannah, I never ever thought in my lifetime that I would ever, I mean, this wasn't even an iota in any space, consciously, subconsciously, or super consciously, in any fabric layer of my being, did I think that, the first vice president or, one of those top two positions would be a woman of color.
Yeah.
I thought that, they're going to introduce it more from what they're familiar with, having kind of the Caucasian representation. And then we saw Michelle Obama and just truly how she fully represented, an entire culture of people and women, not just women, but of people that stepped up to the table. And honestly, my mind has always been that, she will be the first president of America because
you're
of
not
all
alone.
the credentials that she comes with on all kinds of levels. It just seemed that she was so well poised to be, positioned in that way. So, what I found interesting, I just kind of want to step back because this is a question that you also asked Tessa, and I was kind of like, oh my God, I need to answer this question. And just when she kind of put her hat threw her hat onto the table regarding, the presidency, which many of us, including, let's be honest, like South Asians out there, let's be honest, we thought it was like a big fat joke. Right. We thought, okay, come on, what is she doing? Right. Like, but what I kind of realized after kind of watching how serious she was about needing that representation and feeling like she was the right person to represent a certain skill set and bringing a certain perspective to the table. Even though it was more kind of underlined, she never really at that point came out and said, I am this kind of person. She, from an ethnicity perspective so much, it was more, this is what I represent for America, right? That's what we saw at that point until she went into the vice president nomination position. This is when I feel that she got the confidence to speak up and say that I'm a Black woman and I'm a South Asian woman and this is who I am. Obviously, we know it was a strategic decision. Like it had to be a strategic decision because when you got two older gentlemen, both Caucasian, both very, very visible, where's the point of differential there? Like, how do you create an environment where you are speaking to everyone in America? This had to be a step that was made. So when I was watching that, Hannah, like you, I mean, I just couldn't stop crying like all the time. I had my Kamala sweatshirt on. I was sitting there and I had a whole day planned. I canceled the whole day because I realized that I was becoming extremely overwhelmed, because as you know from our generation, Hina, when we were kind of thrust into the world as teenagers and then as young adults, we were told, you know, it was made clear to us that don't up your ethnicity. Like, don't talk about the fact that you're a woman. Put your expertise and your professionalism to the table and try and fight the big animal. You know, it just wasn't something that you and I were allowed to do. We weren't trained to put our ethnicity and our femalehood forward when we were being trained to go out in the big wide world. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the big, like and I think to myself, like, what was the big change? Like, what actually happened that made the change here? It's simple. The power of voices went from the big media houses to the general public. That single one transition of power that went into the people, where all of a sudden everyone's a media company, is, I feel, what actually propelled us forward into finding some semblance of equality, which we're, you know, far away from, but much more closer to being in this younger generation than it ever has been in our generation, our parents' generation, the generation before them that came from the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, what has changed? That's it. That's the one thing. The power went from the big five to everyone with social media. All of a sudden, everybody has the power to say that I need to be seen and heard.
Exactly.
Right? So
yeah, no, I totally, I mean, you're totally spot on. I mean, one thing which I wanted to go back and kind of talk to you about was when you were saying that, you know, during when Kamala was running for her, when she threw her hat in the ring for the presidential, when she was running for the Democratic Party's, you know, candidacy for the president of the United States. And that was in 2019. So let's keep in context the timing, because I really feel there is a magic to the timing of her.
Right.
Then 2020 happened. Yeah. And you had the revolution, the BLM revolution, which took on the entire, which woke up the importance and not even waking up, I think it just further amplified the importance of BIPOC voices in the mainstream conversation. And then obviously Biden understanding the value of that. And then you see, you know, with in that context, Kamala has started coming into her own, and she started talking about, or further amplifying, not that she's never talked about it before, but maybe we just never paid attention to it, honestly, too.
Right, absolutely.
Way, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
And now you see her leaning into her Blackness, leaning into her South Asian heritage, talking about her mother a lot more, to the voices that are listening, which is the social media and the people who are listening, the potential voters. And if this happened in 2019 or 2018, I don't think she would have made the inroads that she has made. I think the fact that she came to being in 2020, which was such an impactful year, yes, with COVID and BLM and all of that combined, I think that just she became the right person in the right moment.
Right.
You know, and you know me, Raj, I've been following Kamala since she was the district attorney of San Francisco. I've been like following her for years.
Absolutely.
And how I found out about her is because randomly I came across her and I go, wait a minute, that's an Indian name. And then I dug in and I started researching. I was like, hold on, she is someone we need to pay attention to. Right. And then how Tessa and I were talking about earlier, the Senate hearing started, and how she became viral with her questioning with Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, and just kind of went on and on and on. And you could tell that she kind of captured that passion of that segment of society. And you could see that, okay, this woman is, if she lines her ducks in a row in the right way, she can get somewhere. But can we just first give props to her husband?
Oh my gosh.
Because, you know, I mean,
Yes.
listen, I'm going to say this, not many men would resign from their law firm that they have established decades-long career in,
Right.
to support and follow his wife's, however, wherever, you don't know where she's going to land.
Right.
But follow that dream of her going for the top. You know, that has to be commended.
Absolutely. And, you know, and it's very different from the expectations that you have traditionally with gender roles, right? Not just, and that is kind of amplified times 100 when it comes to, you know, the South Asian culture.
Exactly.
And, you know,
and we should look to him.
Yes.
As South Asians.
Yes. And even to our men. This is a great lesson to our boys and our men that, you know, it's about doing the right thing. It's not about anything else. Like, let's just simplify this. And, you know, we can go into all kinds of discussions about this. At the end of the day, it's about doing the right thing. You know, which of the two people, if it has to be one or the other that goes to work, is going to have the greatest impact, you know, in the professional arena. And this kind of is the decision that was made here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I mean, do you see the exchange between them constantly when they're in public? It's just, I am always kind of enthralled in the subliminal messaging and communication that is constantly going on with their glances and his gentle touch, you know, of her, and just saying, don't worry, honey, I'm right here. It's almost like you get this sense that, you know, I want that. I mean, that is just a beautiful thing, sweetheart.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
And one thing I noticed as well, even with her, is, you know, she's not aggressive with him. You know, you'd think a woman like her, A-type, you know, strong, very assertive, because that was her upbringing, and that's the work that she's, you know, kind of cultivated in terms of her professional space. But when she's around him and with him, you know, you see a lot of the feminine side of Kamala really exchanging in her verbal and non-verbal communications. It's actually a really beautiful thing to see, to be honest.
It really is.
Absolutely.
Like, for me, I just watch that couple and their family with the stepkids. Like, I see all of that, and they're very good friends with his first wife.
Right.
I mean, she volunteered for her presidential run.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Like, it's like so beautiful. And, you know, we really should look to them as examples, because honestly, they're such a good example, both Kamala and her husband, Doug. Now, one thing which I noticed, so during, you know, as the day progressed and I was looking at the, you know, online, everyone started posting videos and all of that stuff of, you know, their kids watching, and one stood out to me, and it was just so beautiful. This little girl, she must have been all of 5 or 6, and she's watching, and her mother is videotaping her, and her mother's saying, you know, Kamala, she's half Indian. And the little girl goes, just like me.
Yes. I saw you've reposted that on Twitter, didn't you?
Yeah. And then she leans in and she goes, look, she's also my color.
Yes.
Can I tell you how that just hit my heart?
Yeah.
And I just,
because you remember that narrative, babe, when we were growing up, that narrative of, it wasn't even there. And that's why even till today, I'm like shocked at the fact that, you know, Kamala made it as far as she did, because, you know, although here we are, you know, we've been in Anokhi for the last, like, you know, 18 odd years or so. And, you know, our goal has always been to kind of elevate and propel and create awareness for our voices as South Asians in the diaspora and beyond, right? And it's been because there's never been, you know, anything out there that has like truly told the proper stories, the stories that are the stories that we really live by people who are like us, and not the stories of media in India, right? Like, there's just a few of us that exist that, you know, are dedicated to that, you know, narrative. And to see that narrative actually play out on a level this powerful in one of the most powerful countries in the world, I mean, I look at it like a company, right? Like the political system, the infrastructure, that it's all like a big company. And just think the second most powerful person in that company is South Asian and a woman. Hina, it's like we weren't brought up as children, as girls, to think that is a possibility for us. Meanwhile, like you mentioned, and that video that you tweeted, it's a possibility for them. Yeah. It's a possibility for the girls today. Think about that. It's so huge, babe.
Isn't it? I can't even wrap
yes.
You know, like you're saying it and I'm reading it and yes, okay. But just the fact that, yeah, it's a bit mind-blowing, you know, because for them, it's their reality. It's their reality.
It's their reality, Hina. It was never a part of our reality. No. It was never a part of our narrative, but it is forever going to be a part of all generations' narrative as BIPOC women in America moving forward. And the first time that happened was when Michelle came into the position that she did. All of a sudden, the opportunity that, you know, we too, we too.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just came, it came into, you know, fruition, into reality. You know, it's interesting because there's something that you said a little bit earlier that I wanted to share with you as well, and just kind of the gender role thing that we were talking about. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, one of the big statements that Kamala has always made throughout her career, at least in recent times, was that, you know, she saw herself as a progressive prosecutor. Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, when you think about words like that, you think about, you know, people who have very kind of male characteristics, right? Like, you know, if you're going to kind of look at it from that perspective, traditionally male characteristics are ones that are in those kinds of, you know, more assertive roles, right? And are making assertive decisions like that. And then we saw Biden, who was standing up there, and the speech he gave, honestly, if I didn't hear his voice, that could have been even a woman speaking. Like his speech was not aggressively male, right? Yeah, and he talked about having a partnership. I mean, you know, like when you read that about, you know, how he felt about bringing Kamala to the table, he talked about it as being a partnership, sweetheart. Think about the power of the usage of these words that in and by themselves will change the trajectory of, you know, traditional gender roles, you know. Absolutely. And you know what it brings me back to? It's funny because, you know, me being like a Hindu Punjabi as well as a Sikh Punjabi, I mean, in yogic philosophy, male energy and female energy. So male energy is known as Shiva and female energy is known as Shakti, right? They have to exist together. Like one without the other, right? Life cannot exist or be maintained. So it's interesting. I almost kind of feel, and I know I'm getting a bit prophetic here, but I almost feel like, you know, we've got Biden and Kamala, right? Where it has a lot more male characteristics than, you know, people generally expect women to have, but that's a whole other conversation because I beg to differ. And here's Biden with a much more softer, a much more gentle, and a very passionate oration of his speech, which are very female traits. And it's interesting to see how this partnership of gender, you know, crossing over and you know, becoming kind of like the divine male and female energy is going to work together to change and make America great again.
You started to say it and then your eyes were like, wait a minute, I have to finish it there because the sentence only makes sense.
Oh my God, I just had to say it, love.
That is hilarious. Yeah, no, it's very true. I think they are very, and it's into how you were talking about the partnership, because it has been very well documented that past vice president roles have been really a certain way. And this vice president role, from what Biden has been saying and what other people have been saying, he was very conscious of the fact that he's, you know, he is up in years and he wants a partner. He doesn't want someone who is just out there cutting ribbons and just kind of cleaning up the mess. He wants someone who is there. And if you take a look at, I mean, you know, we're week one into his administration, but if you take a look so far, she has been in the room every single time he has been signing executive orders or, you know, taking on, you know, doing a press conference or what have you. And that partnership is really important. And she will have a very big role, and she will break the traditional vice president role and create her own. You
Absolutely.
can kind of see that happen, you know, and, you know, yeah, it's, you know, I get emotional when I talk about this. Like, it's just unbelievable that it happened. And to be honest, you know, I wrote that article when you and I first talked about when she got picked by Biden, and I went on your show in August to talk about it.
Yes.
And, you know, and I was like, yeah, this is great. And she's this and that and the other. And you said, you know, will it work? Well, you know, because
even your title though, sweetheart, it was so provocative.
Because that's how I felt it. I go, you know, I don't know if it's going to work, but you got to take that chance. It's a risky choice, but you need to take that risk now at this point in your life.
Absolutely.
At this point of the political cycle.
And that's not to take away from the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, don't vote for someone because they're a woman. Don't vote for someone because they're, you know, ethnic.
I hate when people think that.
But they do, right? Like, look at how many people bandwagon, you know, and if you were to ask them, so what are, you know, what is her political agenda? What does she believe in? What are she and Biden putting forth? They don't have a clue. They have no idea about politics. They just get on the bandwagon. And that's the big fear, you know, and it's interesting because, you know, when you look at a lot of the reports out there when it comes to South Asians in America, right, they're very split in terms of those who support her and those who don't agree with her policies. Right. It's very interesting, you know, and I feel that is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. There's so many layers. There's so much that they need to resolve in America. You know, not just, you know, racism and the things that have been there in the underbelly and in the overbelly for, you know, so many centuries, but now they're faced with many other issues that were left behind with the previous administration. But, you know, the other interesting thing is it'll be interesting to see how her gender and her ethnicity will play into the mix, because, you know, on one side it's, you know, she's got the support of the president and she's in that position, but you're talking about, you know, that top down infrastructure of what is the political machine in America is still very, very, you know, prominently male. But then you look at all the people that they brought to the table that are South Asian under this administration that they've announced. Hina, you got to talk about that.
I was just going to get into it because, you know,
you wrote about it. You wrote about it. So oh my God, let's talk about that.
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. So, you know how you were talking about Joe Biden's speech. So I wanted to say, well, it was written by Vinay Reddy, who is a South Asian man.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
He is.
There's hope for our male South Asians to put forth their feminine side, because that was such a beautifully orated and written speech that sounded like it could have been that it was a woman that wrote it. Honestly,
it was a very powerful speech, and it hit all the right notes in such a balanced and relatable way. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. So I did this article, and there's 20 South Asian men and women who are part of the Biden-Harris administration. And it's fascinating. You must please, if you have a chance, please go to anokhilife.com and check it out. It's pretty much called the 20 South Asians who are part of Biden-Harris administration. So you can find it.
And it went live on Friday, right?
Yes.
Friday? Yeah, Friday, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I put this together, I was reading up all of their bios and their work history. And a lot of them actually came from the Obama administration, which makes me think, my goodness, they must have been hired right out of school because they're all so young. I mean, you know, so it's so impressive. But it's such a variety of work histories being brought to the table. And you know what I mean? It was just really fascinating. I mean, you had Gurmeena Verma, who is worked in marketing for various film studios out in California.
Mm-hmm.
And she volunteered for the Biden-Harris administration during, the campaign. And she was in charge of designing all the graphics and, for the volunteers to hand out while they were running, doing the door-to-door campaigning, canvassing, that's what it's called.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And, and then she got hired on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, and I think she's like the digital director to Dr. Jill Biden.
Wow.
So it's just fascinating to see such a wonderful variety of men and women,
Mm-hmm.
South Asian. And these aren't, middle to low level positions. These are like high level positions, very adjacent to the executive cabinet.
Right.
And it's just really impressive. And it's very inspirational. And boy, oh boy, you read their bios and you're just like, man, what did I do with my life? Because they're just so accomplished. But it's wonderful to see that and see that energy being brought forth. And again, another example of representation that you can show your nieces and nephews and your kids, boys and girls, that, you know what, there is a place for us in politics, because politics is very different than, and it's not a straight road either. It's not like being a doctor. You have to go through a certain schooling, then you do your different areas, and then when you go into politics, you can get in there from very different routes. And
well, look at Trump.
Well, hello. Let's not look at Trump.
No political background whatsoever, no trajectory whatsoever.
Exactly.
So it's it's possible.
It's possible, and it's seeing these men and women in Biden-Harris's campaign. It's just so, I don't know. It just feels good. It feels good that we're there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And we're there genuinely for our talent, for our minds. We're not being tokens. We're not going to be used as tokens. It's not a flash in the pan. We're not how in the film, there's always the best friend. We're not the best friend. We're the lead now.
Right. Oh my God, what a great statement. What a great way to close off this conversation,
Hina.
Hina.
The lead now.
Yes.
There you go.
And time will tell. And politics is a very interesting animal, regardless of who is in positions of power and who can, who are decision makers. So we'll see what happens. And this is a very difficult year for the entire world when it comes to all the major amplified issues that need to be dealt with. So whoever would be in that position has got their work cut out for them. But it's great to see that we have representation of both genders, of different ethnicities, different backgrounds.
Yes.
That gives us a more holistic approach to running the country. That's what I hope to see happen.
And having a woman of color being the vice president. I mean, forget the women of color, the fact that a woman is there, because, a woman has a different way of leading, and it can be more productive, And quickly, before we sign off, I was reading an article about the COVID ravaged nations, and those nations that were led by women did far better.
Yes.
So
Australia, what were the others?
New Zealand. God, there's New Zealand
in Europe.
Yeah. There's all these different nations that were led by women that did better. They were able to,
Enough said.
There you go.
Great way to drop the mic and end your conversation, my dear.
Thank you, Raj, for taking the time out this afternoon. I really wanted to share. The excitement and enthusiasm, and really kind of dig deep with you. So thank you so much. It was such a great show.